I want to introduce some absolutely amazing people who all share a common goal: to simply make this rock we live on a little more beautiful. We have Starlight Williams, a National Geographic travel editor, and focuses her work on conservation. I knew I was going to screw that word up. I have right here, don't screw it up. Accessible adventures and cultural and paranormal tourism. Julia Cosgrove is the vice president and editor-in-chief of AFAR. AFAR? How bad am I? Oh, thank you. A round of applause for me, please. Thank you. Which is a critically acclaimed travel media brand. We have Sarah Clements, is the former travel editor of the Wall Street Journal and news director at Travel and Leisure. Now she's a freelance writer about travel, real estate, business, gender issues, lifestyle, and other topics. We also have our mediator for this morning, Kate Nelson, who is an award-winning writer and editor based here in the Twin Cities, and the editor-in-chief of Artful Living magazine. Now, before we get started, I want to remind everybody that downstairs is a wonderful little coffee shop called Fika. I'll be down there getting a Sitka bun. You can come and hang out. Also, outside, we have a wonderful Cash coffee bar that you are more than welcome to. You can stay all day if you'd like, and we can chat about everything that we hear today. So, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Kate Nelson!
All right.
There we go.
Wow. That was maybe the biggest lead up I've had. So I'll take the round of applause and just let me know when you're available so that you can always just sort of do a pump up. But let's bring up our wonderful panelists, Julia, Starlight, and Sarah, to join us here for this important conversation we're having. They are the experts. I'm just here to sort of guide us on this journey this morning. So we're here to talk about sustainability in travel, which is a huge topic. And you're here because it matters to you, but you want to understand it better, which is exactly what, like I said, these experts will be doing. Our goal by the end of our conversation today is that you understand the most pressing issues that we're facing right now, why they matter, and then what we as consumers, travelers, globetrotters can do, and also what we should expect the travel industry to do to hopefully get us going in the right direction. So just to get things going here, I'd love for everyone to speak on what are the most troubling trends that we're seeing right now in the world of travel. Julia, maybe you want to kick us off.
Sure. Well, hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I feel like Minneapolis is an incredible, hospitable place already. Thank you for that pump up, Max, in the back. Travel. We've missed it in the last few years. Many of us have not been able to kind of go to all of the places in the world that we were able to go to previously. There's a quote that I have probably wrung out so many times in panels like this one, but I think it's a good starting place. The writer Arundhati Roy wrote this great op-ed, I think for The Guardian, the UK Guardian, in 2020. And she said, the pandemic can be a portal. And she went on, and her writing is so beautiful. You should go find the story and read it. Also because 3 years later, it probably has interesting nuances. But I've thought a lot about that and what that could mean for travel and the travel industry and the role that I play as the editorial head of a travel media company. And I would love to see a world where we don't even have to say sustainable travel, we just say travel. And what that means for what we do at AFAR, we sort of tweaked our mission slightly from what it was in 2019 to make a positive impact on the world through high quality storytelling that inspires, enriches, and empowers travelers who care. We define travelers who care. I'm guessing all of you in this room would qualify. Conscientious global travelers who seek out experiences that reflect their values. I personally believe that travel can be a force for good if it's done with a lot of intention. And I know we're going to get into what that actually means for sort of individuals, the travel industry, tourism boards, governments. So I'm gonna stop there, I think, and let others speak.
Starlight, do you want to pick up on that? What are some of the troubling trends that we're seeing? What are the main issues right now in the travel world?
I feel like from my own perspective, the idea of sustainable travel is that there's not a quite defined term for it. So everyone is chasing their own definition of sustainability. And for us to actually get anywhere we need to be is maybe come up with one blanket way to go about it and how to actually target and start and doing impactful things rather than surface level changes. So I feel like the changes are we want to do good technically, but how do we also juggle that with corporations, making sure that people are also making profits, that we're conserving places, that people are still going to where they need to go? And how do we juggle and balance that all together where it's still not only great for the planet, great for the community, but also still the enriching experiences that you get when you get to explore the world that's not part of where you are from. Also the idea of the push of with mass tourism, and then we're looking to different places to go to. We're creating different mass portals where we're like, okay, we're not going to go there, but we're going to go here, but now you're just flooding a different place. So the idea is how do you make sure that it's everyone has balance? And that's when I feel like the thing for sustainable travel is that there's not quite balance. And the idea that sustainability, what does it mean? And have we ever actually described what it means? And maybe we should stop looking away from sustainability where it has come kind of passive, where everyone gets to just say, oh, yes, we're sustainable. Yes, we're green. Yes, we're focusing on that. And maybe say, instead of speaking the words, we're actually showing the actions that are proving that things are getting done, that we're actually leaving the planet better that we saw it than we had. And we're looking towards a better future rather than saying, oh, at least we're not making it as harmful. We're actually making it better.
And Sarah, I'd love for you to put a finer point on that of some of the issues we're seeing related to over tourism, travelers headed to destinations that might not have the infrastructure to support that. Basically, those major issues that we're seeing in the travel world.
Yeah, I think I would boil our issues down to, is this working? Is this working?
Yeah.
Okay. I would primarily boil the travel issues down to numbers and the current culture of travel. So if you look back at 1950, there were 25 million international arrivals around the globe. And that is 25 million people who went to another country and decided they were going to stay there overnight. In 2019, there were 1.5 billion international arrivals. That is just an astronomical level of growth over a half century. And combined with that, what I am concerned that we have is a culture of binge travel. And it's as unhealthy for the world at large as binge eating can be for individuals. And we've really glamorized over the past maybe 20 years, especially with the advent of social media, we've really glamorized more is better, and traveling more is almost virtuous. I'm a traveler, therefore I'm a good person. I go farther. I go to more remote places. And what's left out of that equation is what impact our journeys have on the planet at large in terms of carbon emissions, in terms of preservation of natural spaces, and in terms of the cultural impact that we have when we go places. I think we mentioned over-tourism. Over-tourism really reached a crisis point before the pandemic. And one of the upsides of the pandemic is it gave some destinations some breathing room to decide they didn't want things to look like they had in 2019. Places like Amsterdam and Venice, and I'm sure we could come up with a whole list of Hawaii. Places where communities have decided that they want to change the way their destination is used, for lack of a better word, and they are trying to take back some of that control. So I think when you talk about travel/tourism, one of the big challenges is that it's a very fragmented industry. So you've got road trips, which is different from taking flights, and you've got tours, and you've got tour buses, and you've got cruises, and you're dealing with all these different destinations that all have different levels of infrastructure and different types of governance. And how do you make all of that better? Gosh, it's a really big and complicated question.
Well, and Sarah, you touched on the idea of the impact that we're having as travelers, but I want to talk about that. So now that we've outlined some of these key issues, what are the impacts, both locally in these destinations and then globally, that we're seeing now that we'll see more of in the future? Julia, maybe you want to
Yeah.
touch on some of those.
So last fall, I went to a state of Washington tourism conference and attended a summit on outdoor responsible travel, outdoor recreation and responsible travel. And there was a woman from the San Juan Islands DMO, Destination Marketing Organization. And she said, you have to be more careful with an island. All the trash you throw away in your hotel room gets taken away in the same ferry you came in on. Why had I never considered that before? I mean, I'm the editor-in-chief of a travel magazine. But that stuck with me because it can apply to so many places other than islands around the globe. And my mom just came back from a big trip to Egypt, and my mom is in her mid-70s and a good Berkeley lefty, I'll put it out there. And she just said, I don't know what we're going to do with all the plastic in these countries. And I said, well, Mom, it's everywhere. Let's not say one country over another. At this same State of Washington tourism conference, I believe it was somebody from the national parks who said, special places don't stay special by accident. We all have a responsibility to determine what those resources, values, and characteristics that we are needing to protect and share. A woman from one of the, I think it was the Snoqualmie tribes, said, we need to shift the paradigm from promoting outdoor recreation as if these lands are a playground for human beings, instead of vital ecosystems that need stewardship and care. Successes would include respect, responsibility, and guardianship, which is a very non-Western approach, and Indigenous tribes need to be involved at the top. I mean, you could apply that to the world, right? And I think the travel industry, which is so fragmented, has a lot of deep thinking to do around some of these ideas, and they're doing it. I will say that I go to so many conferences and I feel like there has been that an inflection point has happened, but we don't have a lot of time. Like the time is now.
Sarah and Starlight, would love to have your thoughts on this too. What are the impacts of those troubling trends we're seeing in the travel world right now?
I feel like in a way, if you're thinking about the individual traveler, sometimes you forget when you go to a new destination that if the same person's coming into your place, you would want them to protect the place. You would want it to maintain the beauty of the culture. And so when you go to another place, you're like, oh, well, I'm going to treat it like it's not my home, actually. And we forget that you're going into someone's community, they're welcoming you there, they want to share that with you. And if you're going to destroy it, then why bother come? And the same thing, you don't want to make a mess in your own yard, why make a mess in someone else's? So the idea of the troubling issues of people going to new places, exploring the world, but they forget that in their own community, they can make a difference. And with the passion that you have of your own place, you can carry that passion to someone else's and respect that place and kind of even out some of the disturbances that you see where you saw all over the pandemic, where people were going out into these natural spaces and there was vandalism, there was destruction, there was all these terrible things. And you're like, well, would you do this in your own place? Would you do this in your own home? Would you want this to happen in your own place? Mass storms you see with Barcelona, what you see with Venice, you see with Amsterdam, all these places that had mass cruises, and locals themselves were like, we don't want you here. But these areas were so dependent upon tourism to survive in certain ways. And so where are you finding that balance of like, well, we don't want these outsiders in this space because they can't protect it, but we need them because they're also funding this giant sector of employment of like to make our country run in its own way. So that corporation balance is really twisted, that people forget on the individual level of how they can make their own difference. It's not always, okay, what's the bigger picture? What are the hotels? What are the cities themselves, which is very important, but also what are you doing to make that difference? And I feel like that can really help surround and change the whole base. Also, you'll see a lot of destinations. It's no longer about destination marketing. It's more about destination stewardship. You see that word being tossed around a lot more, where places are realizing that if they can't get their own community to be invested into sharing the space, then how are they going to sell it to someone else? And why would you want to? If you're going to come in and it's not the places aren't protected. You see that a lot in Hawaii right now, for example, where it's so overrun, it's overcrowded, where the local community is like, we can't even live here. The things that we love about our island, the things that we love about our space, it's being so destroyed, and you're pushing that. You're telling more people to come here and to take over that. And there's a change of conversation where people are actually sitting down with their community, destination marketing situations are sitting down with their community, like, well, what do you want? How do you want to be promoted to the world? How do we get people to make sure that everyone is happy in their own way? And I feel like that ground-based conversation is really becoming more prevalent today. That's helping with these situations of like, okay, if conservation is at the top of mind, if protecting the local communities at the local mind, the infrastructure at the local mind, at top of mind, how are we all going to work together so it's not one voice speaking for everyone? It's not, well, like, oh, we know we need this XYZ amount of dollars, so that's what we're going to focus on. And as we work more towards the future, when we realize that money is not everything in the concept of this, that actually protecting space so people can keep coming. Because if you invest all the money in the world and everyone keeps coming, it's destroyed, then what do you have left? Would it be better to not invest in actually keeping the spaces protected so people can continue coming and protect it that way? So I think everything's more starting to be at the more individual level at this point.
Sarah, notes to add to that?
I forgot what the question was.
What do we see as the lasting impacts locally and globally of some of these troubling trends in the travel industry?
Okay. Well, first is carbon footprint. I think this was even in the promotion for this event, which is that travel and tourism contributes 8 to 11% of global carbon emissions. That's pretty big, especially for something that is completely for enjoyment. You know, we don't need travel to some of us would say we need travel, but you know, on the survival needs, it ranks pretty low. So it's totally discretionary, and yet contributes 1/10 of our global carbon emissions. And then, as Starlight and Julia were saying, you have degradation of local communities. Not all of them, but certainly some of them, where real estate prices are getting so high because of tourist demand. Americans are among the most prolific and wealthy tourists in the world. And when we descend on a place, it makes prices go up. Houses get raised for hotels, and apartments get turned into Airbnbs instead of rentals for local people who work there. And that is a very, very challenging situation. I will say on the flip side, because we've started talking a lot about problems, there are, of course, benefits to travel. And to me, one of the biggest benefits is, in some cases, wildlife preservation. Mm-hmm. So we do talk a lot in the travel industry about the economic benefits to local communities of travel, and that's certainly one thing. But there are also places in the world where wildlife tourism, for example, is a very sustainable alternative to people taking down rainforests in order to grow crops, and giving them a living that also encourages preservation of local ecodiversity. Mm-hmm. So something to sort of talk about more, because again, it's a complicated question, because when you say go to Kenya and you are having a vacation in a place where your dollars are helping to contribute to the conservation of the land, in taking that flight, your carbon footprint for that flight is more than the carbon footprint for an entire year mm-hmm. of somebody in a developing country, say Kenya. So there are just so many things to think about, and our impacts are so great. But I think that just starting the conversation is huge, and opening your eyes, as I would say, I will be totally honest. I have written some things in the past that I would not write or assign today because I'm much more conscious about those impacts than I was several years ago.
But it shows growth. And
Yeah,
that's
you're not alone.
and that's what we need at this point, right? It's just about if you're willing to learn and grow. So
And we need to educate other people. I mean, the audience here, we already have people who care and are probably being very thoughtful about the way they travel and want to be even more thoughtful. So how do we get that message out to even more people?
Well, and so now that we've outlined some of the issues, just like you said, Sarah, our audience is here because they're interested in learning how to be a more responsible, mindful traveler. Starlight, you made a good point that it's a really nebulous term, the idea of sustainable travel or sustainable tourism. So I'd love for you guys to share what you believe a mindful, thoughtful traveler looks like these days. Starlight, maybe you can kick us off.
what a mindful, thoughtful traveler is.
It's big. These are big questions.
Yeah, like, there's so many facets of it because it depends. It's one point of like what's important to you, what's important to the destination, and what's important to the bigger picture, right? So in my head, a mindful traveler, it could be anything from what was the thought process of you getting to that location? If it was something, maybe you were doing something more nearby because you realized you wanted to reduce your carbon footprint. One step. Something, what are you doing your research in the places you're staying at? Are you making sure it's not, you're using coded language? It's actually actively making a difference, but not just greenwashing a place. How's community being served and being protected? Is it something where you go into the industry and they can afford to be there themselves, they're not being treated correctly, but you're there for your simple pleasure, but while on the backs of their labor? Are you keeping that in mind? Do they have the infrastructure? You really want to go to this cool remote region, amazing, but do they need you there at this point? Will you make it worse by going there just because you wanted to see something exotic, something different, something far off? So keeping in mind of what is your actual impact and thinking about, there's certain things where you make a compromise, like you were saying, like the wildlife tourism, like you want to go, you helping preserve these specific species that are endangered or going extinct, but how did you get there? And juggling that mindset of being like, well, I'm doing good in one way, but I'm creating harm in another. So what is the most minimum that you can do something that's people free? I think about to myself sometimes, and I really learned this in the pandemic. There's a reason why it's called America the Beautiful. There's actually a lot of beautiful places here in our own country that we sometimes are always thinking that, oh, we need to go off these other places, which don't get me wrong, are beautiful for their own purposes. But how about we take the time to explore our own places, our own cities, our own backyards, and invest in actually growing that? And that's when you're traveling. You are experiencing your own local culture that you might not have acknowledged before. There's different neighborhoods, different communities that you may have never explored, but you've been living in that city your whole life. So how do we start small? And then as you keep building, as things keep getting better, you have the zero emission planes and the electric planes. You have more train travel opportunities. You have road trip opportunities with more electric cars. There are ways that things are slowly and gradually getting better. And that's great that you can add on to the bigger picture story. But it's okay with starting simple. Sometimes simple is beautiful. Sometimes simple is great that you get to see something so unique and so grand. And that, to me, makes a great traveler, where they realize that they can make an adventure out of anything, that they can sit there and explore and give back to their own community, even if it's mean volunteerism. And I don't mean you go off and build houses in some like remote region that's not quite always sustainable in my own mindset, unless you have a degree in engineering or architecture, which concerns me. But the idea, if you are, let's say, for example, you're obsessed with oysters, and you are helping plant oysters in the river, you're helping clean the waters, but then you're also learning how it's helping the community. You're harvesting them, you're learning how to shuck them. And so in the full range, you got to experience something that you truly enjoy. You got to learn something that's part of that community. You got to aid in the betterment of that place. And you got everything, and you got a new adventure. So that's still traveling, is it not? Isn't that the purpose of travel, is to get that better enjoyment, but also in this purpose, give back? And I think that's that's in my mindset what a good traveler is.
And Sarah, you've written a book on the topic. So not to put an added pressure on you, but for you, what does a mindful, responsible traveler look like?
This might be a little bit of a roundabout answer, but what I was thinking as Starlight was talking is actually, I think the first thing a mindful traveler does is they travel less. And it's not going to be a very popular opinion, and it's a little bit of a conflict for people who are in travel media, because our livelihoods are predicated on people traveling. I travel a lot less than I did even a few years ago. I travel a lot closer. There are places that I will not probably go in my lifetime. Among them are the Galapagos Islands, Antarctica, and several other sensitive places. Is my not going to make that big of a difference? I don't know, but that's how I'm choosing to operate. I agree with Starlight about on the subject of trying to bring wonder closer to home. I mean, there's like neuroscience attached to this, right? Like, it's not totally our fault. Novelty inspires emotions. It gets our juices going, right? And what easier way to find novelty than to go to a completely new place, where you have new smells and new sights, new foods, different kinds of people, different clothing. But can we take some of that desire for a difference and bring it closer to home? There's a really famous Mark Twain quote that gets repeated a lot on travel Instagram accounts, and it's something like travel is fatal to bigotry and prejudice. Bigotry and prejudice. I mean, sort of. Like,
I don't know if I would agree with
I
that.
mean, I know people who really travel a lot, and they are racist.
Yeah.
It's like, I know people who travel to far-flung places, but would not consider going to the ethnic neighborhood on the other side of town. Like, what's sort of wrong with this picture here? Oh, sorry, I totally lost my train of thought there.
I can jump in.
Yeah. Jump in.
I mean, I think a mindful, conscientious traveler, like, it does start with when you step out your front door. You have a natural curiosity. You have a desire to do things responsibly and intentionally, and you care about the communities that you visit more than perhaps you care about your bucket list, which that's a term that I would love to see extinguished from our international lexicon, but it hasn't happened yet.
It's actually gotten bigger.
I know. I blame Instagram for that.
I feel like revenge travel.
And revenge. That was where I was going
might be,
next.
Like, above bucket list.
Yeah, I mean, that is to me like the kind of conspicuous consumption version of travel, right? Where you don't actually care about the communities you are visiting. You are there to kind of extract. And that, I'm afraid to say, is what a lot of mass tourism has been about pretty much since its beginning, actually. And so to me, it's doing all of these things that have been outlined. Traveling less. If you go somewhere far, stay there longer.
Yes.
Don't move around so much. I see my mom's friends doing these tours that they're going to, 8 places in 8 days. And to me, it's like, what's the point? Like, if you haven't had sort of a deeper experience or connected with people in a place, then you're really just sort of ticking the boxes off, I saw this place, I saw that place. And that to me is not the sort of deeper, richer, and more fulfilling travel that I actually think has more of an explicit effect on the world and on yourself.
Can I just add one small thing to that? And we kind of said it, but just to really reiterate, like a conscious traveler, is to remember that travel at the end of the day is a privilege.
Yep.
It is not a right. And I feel like if you really go out into the world and realize that it is a privilege that you are able to go somewhere, to use your dollars, to explore something, to learn something, that not everyone gets to do this. And the places that you're going to, they will never get to go to the places that you go to often enough. They will never often leave their own area. So the privilege of you actually getting to experience this. So what do you do with that privilege? And how do you grow from that? And how do you share your knowledge so it betters a place? And I feel like that's something really, because we do take it for granted sometimes. We're like, oh, well, I can go to XYZ place. I explored this beautiful island. I did XYZ, but not everyone will get to share your experience. And the fact that sometimes you hear in the travel community, people talk down to people who don't have their passport, who don't go to places, who don't leave their small community. And it's not for everyone. And it shouldn't be. It should be something that you treat as something that's honored to do, that you're giving back in some way for it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Sarah, were you going to add something?
No, I think it's such a great word to introduce into the conversation. I think it'd be interesting to talk a little bit about mass tourism, because I think Julia made some really interesting points. Although there are also there are a couple of counterpoints to it.
Elitism.
Well, there's that. But also that your footprint can actually be bigger, much bigger, from the independent, exploratory types of travel. If you are, gosh, I was just looking at this statistic the other day. So we deride tour buses, right? Tour buses are actually a highly efficient way to travel.
Yeah.
They're great.
Yeah.
It's a group of giant people all
Yeah.
together.
Yes, all together
As opposed to Ubers and Lyfts and
in one vehicle, or as opposed to two people in a car. Like your carbon output per individual is much higher if you're in a car. And the counterpoint to the issues with over tourism, in some ways there are real advantages to concentrating the tourism in certain places.
Yeah.
One of the things we've been talking about in travel media lately over the past couple of years is go outside the traditional tourist zones and sort of spread the economic benefit to other parts of these communities. But at the same time,
Infrastructure.
yes.
And that dispersal note, again, going back to the State of Washington Tourism Conference, it's not safe for women and people of color sometimes to be out in the middle of nowhere. And so, yeah, it, like all of these things, it's the double-edged sword, right?
We're not giving you any.
I know. Sorry if you expected clarity.
Yes, and when you concentrate travelers in certain areas, you also are not leveling a meadow in order to build a hotel outside of those areas. You are not placing Airbnbs in remote places. And
There's a give and take for everything. So I feel like every time we come up with a solution, you're like, but what
But
about
this?
XYZ group? And I think of that when the reservation system started coming up, where everyone's like, okay, you need to, only specific amount of group could go to a place at different times.
Yeah.
And when I first heard that, I was like, that's brilliant, actually. Oh, wait. But then I thought to myself, wow, you actually made it even more of an elitist, privileged event, because it was like another barrier that I can't get to a place because I couldn't have the time, I didn't have the fee, I didn't have the XYZ.
Right.
And I think about with the national park system sometimes, because I think in my head sometimes I'm like, nature should be free, right? It should be a place that you can go out and explore. But the thing is, you need those dollars to actually conserve the place in the first place. And if you have hundreds of thousands of people flocking into the trails, into the parks, and everyone's going off the path, they're touching things they shouldn't be touching, they're pulling things from the park, you're like, well, I get why I wouldn't want it to be free. I get why I would want it to limit it, but who am I to decide who I'm eliminating it for? And that's where I struggle with, someone who lives in the national park area can't go because someone from 3 states over decided to visit and got the pass first, which fine, but where's the balance in that way? So,
And I mean, so when we started the magazine, we also started a nonprofit foundation. We've sent more than 1,500 students from underserved communities on trips abroad. Travel is hands down, in my opinion, the best form of education. If you don't know that you live 2 hours from a national park, if you don't have the wherewithal, the transport to get there, then the National Park Service is missing an opportunity. And I do applaud their the free 4th grade pass, I think, and they're doing great work for seniors. But that's not even in your sort of realm of possibility. I went to Yosemite twice last year, once in the height of summer, did all of the wake up at 6 a.m., get my pass, 6 months in advance. And then we went again the week before Christmas, and no one was there. it was a much better experience the week before Christmas when no one was there. You didn't have to reserve a pass. So in that case, I do think, yes, shoulder season, off-season travel sort of maybe doesn't mean the same thing it meant pre-pandemic, but our experience of being in a place and sort of gaining that sense of awe and wonder that happens in so many national parks when you sort of feel like you do have it to yourself was so much more heightened in December. Yeah, yeah. And then just one more thing on sort of transit, because I do think, I know it's dull, guys, but so much of it comes back to infrastructure. And we made some progress on infrastructure in this country a year and a half ago when we passed that bill. But I went to Germany and Munich and then to the Bavarian Alps in April of last year. And I took public transit the entire trip. And I was thinking, actually, when I came into Minneapolis last night, this is my first time in your beautiful city, I didn't actually know I could take the rail from the airport straight into town. And I think many countries in Europe have done such a better job of, like, it wasn't even an option in my itinerary to not take public transit. They didn't even think, oh, maybe she'll want a taxi to get to her hotel. Nope. You take the train, then you take the metro. And it was fine. So I just, we have Congress has put a lot of money towards improving our rail infrastructure, and I'm optimistic actually about it, having taken a lot of trains recently. But we have so far to go. Yeah, so far to go.
I mean, it also gets to the.
No, this is great. No need to apologize. This is the whole point of this discussion.
I think it also raises a few of the things we've been talking about, like national parks. American national parks are notoriously underfunded.
Yes.
So how are they going to be free? Like, they don't really have enough money to pay rangers and to protect them in the ways that we should. And the infrastructure thing, public transportation, some of this also goes back to, I think, being a better traveler is not just about the choices you make about your trips, but it's also how you speak up as a citizen. Mm-hmm. And what's that?
You're like,
yeah. It's also how you speak up as a citizen, how you speak up as a consumer when you're in a place, and how you support these changes on a broader scale. Because like we've seen just generally about climate change and environmental issues, like using a reusable water bottle is great.
Great.
It's great. Like, it's a nice thing to do. It's so small.
Same thing with straws.
Straws. Oh my God. Why don't we use
Not having your towels removed every day from the hotel room.
Do you wash your towels every day when you're at home? Okay.
Which, and that, I was staying in my hotel. I was thinking about this just the other day, because the towels thing also has a knock-on effect, a labor issue.
Yeah.
Because there's less work for the people who wash the towels, who clean your rooms. And so what's that balance there? But I feel like thinking about all this stuff can be really paralyzing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like, man, like, how do you make?
Yeah.
And I think that's where we are right now, though, is that we tell people to go get educated. We tell people to learn, and they're like, cool, I've learned so much.
Yeah.
Now what?
Yeah.
You're like, and you start doing the small things you can, because you're like, okay. And I think that was a conversation we were saying in Europe, like, for trains, you don't really have a choice but to take public transportation. Like,
right.
That's the mindset. And I feel like here in the States, in its own way, we know for the most part we want to be green, right? In some shape or form, but it's not always readily available. It's not always in front of your face of like, this is how to do it. And I think about that sometimes recycling. And in most suburban cities, recycling is very popular these days. Urban place, it's really great. But I'm thinking about where I grew up in like a very small town outside of Atlanta in Georgia. And at the time, it was so much effort just to get a recycling bin, just to have that conversation, just to pull it in, that you don't want to jump 30,000 hoops just to do the right thing. And I understand that sometimes, that it's not that it's better, it's just sometimes it's easier. And when people have such limited time and you're focusing on so many different things, you're like, well, I really would love had to recycle this one can today, but I actually had to make sure it was in this XYZ bin, it had to be delivered at this XYZ date, at this certain factory, at this certain time. Mm-hmm. And not everyone has time for that. Yeah. And bless the people who do, like, thank you. But for the people who don't, it's just like, how do they make the difference? How do they things that fit within their mindset, their budget, their plan, to make sure that they're also bettering places without it being an overbearing burden just to exist in that way?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and we've spent a lot of time talking about the individual, what they can do, emphasizing that no effort is too small. But let's talk about the tourism industry as a whole. We've seen a lot of companies make pledges. We haven't necessarily seen actions behind that. What responsibility does the industry itself have in moving towards sustainability? Julie, I'd love for you to kick that
Yeah.
off.
So I think, like so many things in this world of ours, it's individuals, corporations, business, and policy governance. And all of those things have to come together. Daunting. I'm going to talk about yet another. It must sound like I just go to conferences. I swear I also edit and manage a big team of people. But the New York Times did a climate conference in San Francisco last October. And in the opening, I forget who said it, but he said, either you're working in climate now or you will be in the future. And that stuck with me because I realized, well, Afar has done a lot of stories that kind of tangentially relate to this, but hearing that, we need to get ahead of it and we need a climate desk. So we're in the process of defining what that means. Also at that conference, someone said, even if we get all our carbon emissions down to zero, the world does not cool down. It just stops getting warmer. There is a big, smart venture capitalist in Silicon Valley named John Doerr, and he's at Kleiner Perkins. And his daughter, I don't know if she's Gen Z or a millennial, basically threw opening salvo at him, like, you've done this, you've gotten us to this place, your generation has done this, and a little oversimplified, but he took it very seriously and came up with a plan. It's called Speed and Scale. You can see it at speedandscale.com, and it's 6 steps, and it starts with cutting emissions and cutting them fast. Then the first one is electrify transportation. Second one is decarbonize the grid. Third is fix food systems. 4, protect nature. 5, clean up industry. And 6, remove remaining carbon, more trees, direct air capture. Those 6 steps have 55 OKRs, objectives and key results, beneath them that get into the specifics of how to actually do this. There are lots of, there are people speaking at this conference who probably have different plans. But what I'm actually pretty heartened by is, again, I do feel like there's this inflection point that I'm seeing from United Airlines, American Airlines, Delta, like everybody is investing in sustainable aviation fuels. It's very early days, but where I live in the Bay Area, there's a lot of very exciting science going on. Again, it goes back to the youth, I think, they know that this is theirs to solve. The rest of us are just experiencing climate anxiety. 2/3 of Americans supposedly experience some form of climate anxiety. I also
1/3 of that is just me.
It's just you. I also think the hotels like Marriott, I've talked at length with them about what they're doing. Travel Corporation, these really big corporations, global corporations, and they're thinking about these things in ways that they were not a few years ago. And I see sustainability metrics at the very top levels in ways that I did not see several years ago. So there's some optimism.
Sarah, anything to add to that?
Not really. I was thinking about the Travel Corporation thing too. For some, there is a sense in the tourism industry that they're to a certain extent, and especially in certain places, there's some survivability.
Yeah.
There's the impact that tourism has on climate change, and then there's the impact that climate change has on tourism. And that is tremendous, and we're going to see more and more of that. That beautiful beach that you like to escape to in January in Minnesota may not be there in 10 or 15 or 20 years. companies are doing things. I go back and forth on this too. I was looking at some numbers the other day, that currently in the United States, 70% of hotels are chain hotels, which is a complete reversal of what you had like 15 or 20 years ago, where most hotels were independent hotels. And like 90% of the hotels that are opening this year are also chain hotels. So on the one hand, you're losing locally owned, independently run hotels that maybe are more sensitive to the needs of the community and more connected to the community. And on the other side, you have chains, big hotel companies that maybe can have a bigger, broader impact. So I'm really glad that people are doing things, but I think the biggest challenge with the travel companies is that they're saying a lot of stuff and they're doing some stuff.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of transparency often. And the most notorious sector of the travel industry is cruises for transparency and accountability and their carbon emissions and ocean pollution. So what do you do about that? I maybe think twice about being a cruise. That's a tough thing for somebody in travel media to say. Also, like, again,
And there's some really good companies
and there are some good companies, yes.
that I would like.
Also-
Hurtigruten,
Yeah.
and I mean they're leading the way, I think, in electric
Right,
cruise
yes,
ships.
right.
River cruises, it's a mixed bag, and there's a lot going on those rivers in Europe that is sort of unknowable. But yes, the mega ships.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave that there.
Yeah, but also ask for it as consumers. Ask for more accountability. Ask for more transparency. Ask what they're doing and how they're doing it. Because the more people that ask for that, the more pressure they are going to feel to provide it.
I listened to the very tail end on Friday, I think, of the Smithsonian's State of the Union, and this note just stuck in my head. The president, who, oh my God, why is his name escaping me? Someone in the audience must know this. He was the head of the African American Museum, and now he's been appointed to this larger Lenny. Anyway, sorry. He said we should be coming from a place of ethical posture first, foremost. And I think about what that would mean for all of these companies, all of these businesses to start there. And some of them do. In fairness, some of them do. Some of them are B Corp. Some of, Modern Adventure is a small outfitter out in Portland. They're doing really great work. Intrepid, G Adventures. These are all, I think, very good, conscientious companies. But anyway, where was I going? Smithsonian thing. There was a woman who commented, I'm a housewife in Idaho. What impact can I possibly have with all of the polarization going on in our country? And I would say, and he had this beautiful response. But look what's happened to our school boards. That started with housewives. Look what's happened to banning books. That started with the individuals who come together can have an impact. You can make an impact with companies, with local government. Local governments, get bigger, federal government. I mean, so I don't think all of this should be placed on the individual at all.
No way.
There's no way it'll ever work if it's placed on the individual. But you can make a difference in your purchasing power, and writing letters like, hey, TK Cruise Line, hey, TK Hotel Company, what are you doing about this? This seems like a problem, and I'm a customer of yours.
And it kind of goes back to the circle you were saying earlier. It's like if the individual becomes a group, puts pressure on the company who has a bigger voice puts pressure on the policymakers and the government, and then it kind of goes back full circle and it all connects together. So,
Okay, we have covered a lot of ground. And like we talked about, and as you've seen, this is a really complicated topic. We're not going to solve all the world's problems during this 1 hour we have together. If you have a final takeaway, though, for our audience here, What would that be? Julia's smiling, so we're going to start with her because she seems like she's
I'm
prepared to
looking at
answer
my
this.
No, I mean, I think, you know, when I was flying here and writing all these notes, it was like, oh God, how do I go to another panel and not emerge as Debbie Downer? Like, travel is fun, travel is joyful, travel is the best form of education. As an individual, we can make choices that make travel more responsible. And I'll leave it right there.
Starlight?
I would say there is optimism. Things are changing. Are they changing fast enough? Maybe not. Some of the goals are like 10 years off, and 10 years off, I'm like, we might not be here. But the idea is that at least there's action happening. And the thing is, it's everyone's job, corporation, government, individual person, is just to be like, keep asking questions, keep following up, keep digging, keep making sure that at the end of the day, do what sparks joy, but do things that kind of give back in some shape or way. Even if it's one small thing, that one small thing at the end of the day does help make some difference. It's a drop in the pond, but like it helps. So just kind of keep pushing for that.
Sarah, you have the final word here.
One takeaway. I would say, travel a little less. Try to make better choices. There's more information out there than there used to be. There's information if you happen to use booking sites, and those booking sites are providing information about choices that are more environmentally, I don't want to say sustainable, but sound, more responsible. If you're searching for flights, there's also now more information about the impacts of various flights and what flights are have lower emissions and which flights have higher emissions. So take that into account. Speak up. And I guess finally, I would say, like, think about why you travel. Think about why you travel and how to fulfill those desires in a way that is, I don't know, less harmful or
Less harmful,
more,
but still
more,
fulfilling.
more responsible. Like, I don't want to take away anybody's travel dreams. Like, Venice is over touristed, but like, if you've always wanted to go to Venice, like, you should see Venice. It's an incredible place. One of the challenges of cruises is like, they're actually a great way for a lot of people to travel because they're really convenient. And for people who say have mobility issues or things like that, they can be really great. But mindless travel, I think, is probably harming us all.
What's in the year? What?
It's so funny. You know, I like writing books. I don't really like promoting.
Curious.
But the book is called Away and Aware. It came out a few years ago. And what's the subtitle? A Field Guide to Mindful Travel. It's about ways to travel slower, travel a little more in the moment.
Buy Sarah's book. I'll promote you.
Yeah.
Do it. That's very kind. And you know, I wanted to give one example of a travel trend that I think is actually really great, and that is Indigenous tourism. And Canada in particular is doing a fantastic job promoting its Indigenous tourism experiences, and there are First Nations tribes that have actually bought old resorts or existing resorts and turned them into these really fantastic experiences where you can connect to the outdoors and connect to that culture and also contribute to supporting those communities.
And know how you said restore and not create a whole new place, because sometimes forget that's also a sustainability thing. Like, you can just rebuild something. You don't have to start from the ground up. It helps.
I don't know. Get out there, be good.
All right. So for our audience, thank you so much for coming. A couple of housekeeping notes for you. The next session that'll take place is Kai Selmela, Sense and Sustainability. That starts at 11:30. We'd love for you to stay the whole day. If you're planning to stay but you haven't registered or check in, please do so at the registration table. We'd love for you to connect with the others who were here witnessing this great conversation. We just ask that you do so downstairs. And then check out the Great Northern app to see the full lineup, not only of the sustainability series, but also the entire festival as a whole. Most of all, please give our wonderful panelists a rousing round of applause for helping us tackle this really complicated topic. Thanks again.